Hey everybody, welcome to another review. Today I'm going to be reviewing Foo Fighters' brand new album, but here we are. So this came a year after the passing of Taylor Hawkins, and a lot of fans didn't really know what to expect from Foo Fighters. They did a tribute show in London as well as LA, and that could have been the final act they would have performed, but it shows here the Foo Fighters do want to continue even after the passing of Taylor Hawkins, which is completely understandable, and as much as it is absolutely heart-wrenching, especially since this album is pretty much themed around the passing, or at least the passing of Taylor Hawkins, as well as the passing of Dave Grohl's mother, Virginia, is pretty much what helped write a lot of this album. I do think it's interesting to see where Foo Fighters go from here. So we've had 10 tracks, which is a bit longer than Medicine at Midnight, and honestly I gotta say, for the first time Greg Kurstin has produced a consistent record, considering I have not been a big fan of his last works. As much as I do like Concrete Gold does have some weak tracks, and Medicine at Midnight is just beyond the weakest Foo Fighters album they've released, but this one definitely shows some of Foo Fighters' best work in a long time, to be in one of the most consistent albums they put out, probably say since Wasting Light, if I had to be honest. So we had about a bunch of singles from this record. Rescued was the lead single. It was a pretty on the nose track. You kind of knew this was on about Taylor Hawkins, especially at the start. Like, it came in a flash, it happened so fast, and then it was over. Pretty much that bit. It's a pretty good track, but in my opinion, I think the production is definitely one of the weakest aspects, and I probably would say that about a bunch of these tracks, because I feel Greg Kurstin's production has kind of remained consistent. It's been getting a bit better. This is probably the best album he's produced from the Foos, but it's definitely noticeable. It just kind of feels a little compressed here and there with some of its sounds, so when the guitars are trying to explode, it just kind of feels a little stuck in a way, if that makes sense. Then we had Under You, which is probably definitely the better of the two singles. This one just feels more like a classic Foo Fighters track. Rescued had a little bit of a In Your Honor sort of vibe, in my opinion, but Under You kind of goes for something that feels a bit more like their older stuff, like There Is Nothing Left to Lose. I kind of get a bit of a Generator vibe from this track, and I like it. This one's definitely one of the better ones of the two. It feels a lot more cleaner, and I think lyrically it's just a very nice track. It's just one of the ones that it's not the happiest tone this album has, and I think Under You, even that, it still sonically has kind of a bit more of a cheery upbeat tone. It just feels like classic Foo Fighters. Then we had Show Me How, which is a very experimental one. We actually had Violet Grohl, Dave Grohl's daughter, doing the vocals as well as Dave on this one, and Show Me How, I think this one definitely is more focused to Dave Grohl's mother, Virginia, and that's kind of definitely noticeable with this more moody vibe. It's a bit more of a slower one, but I like this one. I think Show Me How is better than Rescued, at least. It's definitely one of the very experimented ones I really enjoyed. When Concrete Gold experimented, they added a choir into the self-titled track, whereas in Show Me How, they're experimenting with a bit more of a dreamy sort of vibe to give it that little bit of a slower rhythm, and I think it works quite well, honestly. Then we had The Teacher, which is the longest Foo Fighters song to exist. It's just over 10 minutes, and this one definitely plays with its length. It starts off slow, builds up, and it kind of builds up more energy, and goes a bit slower, and then before you know it, it starts to build up again. This one definitely is the most progressive track, and I'm all on board for progressive Foo Fighters, to be honest. And The Teacher, definitely think is one of the hardest songs to listen to. Not that it's length, but lyrically, this one definitely is one of the more personal ones to Dave Grohl. And I think that's not surprised. I saw a 10-minute track, and I thought, yeah, that's definitely going to be a really hard one to listen to. It's a brilliant song otherwise, but yeah, this one is just really to go through. And then we had the non-singles as well as Nothing at All, which I'll quickly mention. Nothing at All was played on the Foo Fighters live stream, and I gotta be honest, I prefer the live version. This track it shortens the sort of break down the bridge. It has a longer build up and it goes into like a little scream before going back into the chorus, but this one kind of feels a bit shorter, and they even add in like vocals like more in between, so it doesn't really feel like it has that build up. It kind of reminds me a little bit of New Way Home, but with a much shorter build up. It goes straight back into the energy, but even then, Nothing at All is still one of the best tracks on the album. It has the most classic Foo Fighters energy and probably one of the most aggressive bangers we've had in a while. I think this easily rivals anything from Medicine at Midnight, as well as it definitely fits right in with some of the more heavier stuff from Concrete and Gold. Nothing at All is fantastic though, definitely one of the more catchy ones, I'd say. One of my all-time favourites is Hearing Voices from this one. It's a bit of a slower, moodier one, but I absolutely enjoy this one. I think it's very, very catchy. It's got such a nice chorus mood change. It definitely changes direction as the chorus hits, and I love that. It's easily one of the more distinguishable ones straight away on first listen. And of course, one of the other better tracks as well is But Here We Are, which I enjoy. This self-titled track is the best one they've done in such a long time. I'm even inclined to say it may be the best self-titled track, rivaling In Your Honor at least. This one is phenomenal, and I absolutely enjoy the hell out of this one. It's definitely one of the heavier ones. It's a bit more gritty in the vocal, similar to Rescued, but I think it's got a bit more of that grit that really pursues some of my favourite aspects to this one, and also instrumentally in that little drum breakdown as well towards the end. I love this one. And then you have the other tracks. The Glass, yeah, this one definitely, I feel this one is a more focus to Taylor Hawkins, if I'm correct. I might be wrong, but this one's pretty good as well. I haven't really got much to say, but it's definitely one of the more what would you say, one a bit more melancholy tracks. I do like still what it offers, but it definitely is one that it's one that I don't get emotional at it, because it's not really, music's not really something that pulls out, but there's always a goosebump feeling and chills just listening to this one, and I think that's just because of the theming and aspect and the emotion that Dave Grohl is going through while writing this. It's very clear, and that's why I commend The Glass to be a great track. From that. And Beyond Me, I'd probably say is the weakest of the bunch. It's probably the one I just forget the most. It's still a good track, but to be honest, but at the same time, I just don't really remember much from this one. All I know is it's pretty much the whole album's themed around Dave Grohl's mum and Dave Grohl's best friend Taylor. But Beyond Me, this is definitely, I'd probably say, the weakest song, but even then I still enjoy it, and I think just sound wise it probably is one of the better produced tracks. It's one that I think has a cleaner palette to it, and it definitely goes well into The Teacher. And then the final one, which I think is a very important track, is Rest. This probably is the most important one. So it starts off really, really slow. You've got some very chilled vocals from Dave Grohl, and the chorus being "Rest, you can rest now, you will be safe now" is yeah, this one is pretty dark, really dark. The this one mentions both Taylor and Virginia Grohl, which is Dave Grohl's mum. I think the outro is definitely very important to know. It's probably one of the most stuck with me lyrics from this whole record. Waking up, had another dream of us. In the warm Virginia sun now I'll meet you. Because Virginia sun being a reference to Virginia Moon, the In Your Honor track, as well as mentioning Virginia, because, well, Taylor Hawkins is going to be where Virginia is. I think there's a lot of deep stuff on this record, and this is the one that really hits you hard. I like the energy on this one. I even like the riff on this one. It feels like Congregation, but in a slower tempo, and I like that. It starts off like a slow riff, but then as it builds up, it's got a little bit more energy, but it's still slow, and it has that Congregation riff to it. And that's what makes Rest definitely a special finale. I'm not really one for slower songs, but Rest is definitely an attempt that shows that they can do it really well. And my first opinion on this record was I wasn't big on it, but going back into it now, I'd probably say it's one of their strongest albums in such a long time. I've seen comments saying that this is the wasting light of the 2020s, but I don't know. I think the only reason I'm not sure is because we've only had 2 albums in the 2020s, and you could argue this is one of the better ones. against one of the worst albums, so it's not really much comparison. At least with Greg Kurstin, it's definitely his Wasting Light. I think there's not a weak track at all, and I think it does push a lot of that emotion to some great ideas. And I've always found bands that have a very emotional, more grieving album working on it, sort of like Korn, have always produced some bangers with it. The Nothing is honestly one of my favourite Korn albums of all time, and this one is pretty much about the passing of Korn's, or the lead singer Jonathan Davis's wife, and I believe his mum passed away as well, if I remember correctly, and this contributed to some very personal work, and I think it can make some of the most emotional impact in some of the, then again, also some of the best songwriting. I think, honestly, emotionally driven stuff is where it really works. I'm not saying that that's a healthy idea, but I think the way that Dave Grohl's using music here to express himself, and the fact that it's only been just over a year since Taylor Hawkins died, showed the band really wanted to do something, and I think this works great. I honestly hope Dave Grohl and the whole rest of the band can do the best on their tour, because there's a lot of tour dates and there's only going to be more being announced as well, so this is going to be a lot of strain on the band, and I honestly commend Dave just for how insane and how he can pretty much write 10 tracks, especially one of the longest ones. They're all pretty good, and go on and do a tour as well, even after Taylor Hawkins' passing. And yeah, I'd probably say Dave is honestly one of the most influential people in the rock scene. He's definitely one of the ones that I think a lot of people look up to, and it's not a surprise here. The Foo Fighters are absolutely great lads. And that is my review of this album. I'm going to give it a 3.5 out of 5. I definitely enjoyed this one, and I think it's got a great vibe. It's not my personal favourite album, and I think Wasting Light is a much stronger track, but the ideas here and the new experimental tracks they play with as well is just fantastic. There's a lot of good bangers on this one, and I definitely recommend it. This is another review, and I will see you guys in the next review. Thanks for watching.